Necrolution from Massacre? More like Necro-Stupid from Massacre. Am I right, folks? Hi everyone, it's me, Uncle Melty, the host of the Metal Meltdown. Things are kinda crazy right now in the world, aren't they? Wow! Things are kinda crazy. And with this in mind, sometimes you just want to sit back and listen to some old school death metal. I feel that it certainly fits the mood. I certainly feel like death right now, so why not death metal? Like, who doesn't love some good old-fashioned suffocation, morbid angel, cannibal corpse, autopsy, death, Nile, and so on and so forth in these times? Who doesn't want to crack open a beer and just listen to some nasty and gnarly shit? And in theory, with all of this in mind, an album like Necrolution from a band like Massacre should be arriving at more or less the right time. But in execution, I'm finding, maybe not? Maybe? I don't know. For those of you who don't know, Necrolution is the 5th full-length studio album from this American death metal crew. Icons of a sort of American death metal, maybe not as prolific and influential, definitely not as successful commercially as some of the other bands we've mentioned thus far, but, you know, stuff like the debut From Beyond, EPs like Inhuman Condition, you know, they absolutely have their place. They are important to reference when we talk about the evolution and the emerging popularity of death metal in the early 90s. But unfortunately, Massacre have proven time and time again throughout the years that they just can't really keep their shit together. They have broken up and reunited so many times that I've lost count. They operated for a brief period in the early 2010s with Rick Ross, no Cam Lee. Now they're back with Cam Lee, but no Rick Ross. And they've also splintered off into other bands at certain points, like there was Massacre X, and then some guys that used to play in this version of Massacre went off and formed their own band, Inhuman Condition, which is basically just like Massacre worship, like literally early 90s Massacre worship death metal. It's honestly pretty fair to say that this is so far the most stable version of Massacre yet. Fingers crossed, knock on wood, you know what I mean? You know, for a normal death metal band, this provides the opportunity to advance your sound. This provides the opportunity to, you know, broaden your horizons and really refine things. Massacre's going in the other direction. They have decided that the best way to evolve is to devolve. And that's not me trying to be sassy or catty. This is a statement directly from Cam Lee. With Necrolution, the idea was to evolve the band's sound by devolving it. Unlike many bands in death metal, the attempt to modernize and update their style and sound to emulate many of the modern contemporary death metal bands, we wanted to go back to the origin, the original sound and style. And again, you know, as we discussed in the very beginning, I can get down with some old school death metal. I think the problem here is that when you're dealing with something so inherently meat and potatoes, you have to know how to cook said meat and potatoes. Like, the reason why the latest albums from Undeath and 200 Stab Wounds were so good and so crushing and so satisfying despite being so simple is that they weren't really so simple. Like, they felt so simple because it gave you those simple death metal flavors, but, you know, at the same time, they were bringing in more complex, varied riffage, pulling influences from some other areas of the death metal realms in a way that was, like, naturally blended into their old school death metal shtick. Like, yeah, it's meat and potatoes, but we're not talking like a meatloaf and a microwaved baked potato. We're talking like a fucking delicious ribeye steak with fucking roasted asparagus and palm aligot and like a fresh fucking onion gravy. Necrolution, on the other hand, is the meatloaf and the microwaved baked potato. And it's just kind of bland and kind of boring. And I've had it a million times, and it's fine. Like, it has nutrition, it'll get you through the day, but, like, that's kind of it. The issue isn't necessarily that Massacre didn't capture the feel and the sound that they were aiming for. The issue is that this old school death metal thing has been done to death already, so to stand out and to really satisfy, you've kind of still gotta go outside your comfort zone a little bit. Like, you have to find a way to bring new influences and ideas. You have to find a way to mix things up and bring that back into old school death metal. And meanwhile, Massacre is just happy to do what they do, and that might work for some, to be fair. But for me, I'm frankly just bored. Like, I had this album on, and I was intently listening at first, and then after a little bit, it was just kind of something I had on in the background. And on my second playthrough of this record, I think halfway through, I was just like, you know what? I'm good. I've heard all I need to hear. I'm done. Looking at some of the tracks individually, there is some stuff that I like Death May Die, for instance, has a very, slow, mid-pace, sinister, churning kind of feel and vibe, a genuinely pretty ominous and evil-sounding cut. Then there's stuff like Fear Unknown, The Color Out of Space, Legacy of the Leeches, these are your classic, old-school death metal ragers, lots of pummeling riffs and aggressive vocals, lots of wild, flailing guitar pyrotechnics. And you've got stuff like Shrouds of Shadows, Ad Infinitum, The Final Hour, Rituals of the Abyss that do a good job at, balancing these more fast-paced, hard-hitting, brutal death metal barrages and also the slower, mid-pace, more ominous, sinister vibes and sounds and feels. But I find that listening to all of this together in a singular package just reveals how unremarkable the songwriting and songcraft really is. Nothing really sticks with you because there's nothing really super memorable about the music. It's not very dynamic. You don't really have any big hooks or, super visceral riffs. The record plays things very safe. It's not an especially long record, clocking in at 46 minutes, but it feels longer because it has 16 fucking songs, and some of these songs are just ambient instrumental cuts that really don't need to be here at all. As far as I can tell, they exist just to pad this thing out. And honestly, considering how Massacre's intention for this album was for it to be a de-evolution of death metal, I feel like they could have done a lot more to, de-evolve. I feel like this thing could have been a lot more raw, a lot more dirty, had a lot more of a grimy, scummy kind of underground feel and finish. I'm feeling like a 2 out of 5, leaning towards a 2.5 out of 5, and I honestly think I'm gonna forget about this record, within a couple of days. Maybe by the time this video even goes online. The issue isn't necessarily that Massacre made a meat and potatoes death metal record. The issue is that they made an inessential, unremarkable, and ultimately forgettable meat and potatoes death metal record. There are hundreds, thousands of bands releasing old school death metal all the goddamn time. I'm sorry, but in 2024, in this genre, doing the same old song and dance just ain't enough. Not for me, at least. I'm sure this will provide some people with a quick and simple and cheap nostalgic thrill, but I'm also sure that this album will be forgotten about within a week, people will move on, nobody's really gonna care aside from, the mega Massacre diehards, if there are even, a lot out there. I've no clue, I guess I'm about to find out. As far as I'm concerned, I stand by my 2 out of 5, leaning towards a 2.5 out of 5, mediocre, meh, mid, all the words, next time season your steak a little better. Next time cook your potatoes a little better. I don't know what to tell you. And that is it for the Metal Meltdown. I am not an expert, nor do I claim to be. So what do you think? Do you like this record? Do you not like this record? And what do you want to hear from me next? And thank you for watching. Make sure you press subscribe right here so you get updates on the Metal Meltdown fucking immediately. Boom, look, more videos there. That's so crazy. And as always, you have yourself a fantastic fucking day.